So here are some vintage watches that I pulled out of our safe. This is an Omega Speedmaster. It is from 1969. It has a caliber 861 movement. It's a reference 14502269ST. It has the original bracelet on it, and the bracelet has the original spring-loaded expansion links on each side. So this is a very nice example of an all original Speedmaster. But as you can tell, look at the bezel, it's very worn. The original owner of this watch used this watch a lot. But we serviced the watch, it's in perfect working condition. And yep, it definitely has signs of age. But still, it's a watch that can be enjoyed for many decades to come. It has never been polished. Polishing a watch or not polishing a watch, that's something that's like personal preference. A lot of people ask, should I polish a vintage watch? Should I not polish it? It really is your personal preference. When I first started working on watches, I used to like to polish everything. I didn't care how rare it was. I didn't care how old it was. When I restored a watch, I wanted to make it look like day one from the factory. And I was buying watches and restoring them, making them look as close to new as possible. And if I had good cosmetic parts, like if I had a better bezel, obviously I'd replace it on a watch like this. But back then, yeah, I used to try to polish back to original factory specs or as close to factory specs as I could. But what I soon found out is that when I started doing the watch trade shows about 18 years ago, I had a lot of vintage like Rolexes and watches, higher end watches, and I noticed a lot of the buyers were looking at them and they're like, oh, this is polished, this is polished. And a lot of guys were telling me, hey, don't polish the watches anymore. You have beautiful watches, but don't polish them. So I kind of like, my personal preference, even when I had a huge collection of watches and I used to collect vintage Omegas and vintage Zodiac wristwatches, and I used to like to restore them to look like new. And but you know, as I got older, I started to appreciate more the originality of a watch. So in trying to keep a watch as original as possible, I've stopped polishing watches like this. Obviously, I've stopped doing that many years ago. You know, so we'll get a watch like this. We would do a service by doing a complete disassembly of the movement, cleaning, oiling, timing, adjusting for accuracy, but not touching the case, the bracelet, the dial, the hands. The only thing we would do to the case and bracelet is clean them in a heated ultrasonic bath, but nothing more than that. When you're polishing a watch like this, it definitely can affect the value. You know, if you're keeping the watch for the rest of your life, you want it to look like it was new from day one, have it polished. But if you're ever going to resell it, you're going to lose some value because the next person that comes along wants it to be as original as possible, and that's where you can lose the value as far as having a watch polished. Now there are, you know, people always ask on like newer modern watches, is it okay to have them polished? The thing is, there's so many watches that are not rare and they literally make them by the hundreds or thousands per day. So, you know, even like 50 years from now, some of those watches are not going to be rare. So if you have a watch and you want it to keep it looking nice and new, just have it polished. it's not really going to affect the value even 50 years from now because it's not a very rare watch. Now here's another watch that we have. This is an Omega Constellation with the pipe hand dial. It's a reference 167005. It's from 1964. The crown is an Omega crown, but it's not from this model watch. It's from a different model Omega. The emblem that you see on the back is solid gold emblem. The top of the watch is solid gold capped, and the bottom of the watch is stainless steel. What solid gold cap means, it's literally like gold poured over stainless steel. So it's better than being gold filled or gold plated. But the Omega Constellation pipe hand dial has always been one of the most desirable watches among vintage watch collectors. I used to have a lot of Omega Constellation watches with pipe hand dials in my personal collection, which I no longer have because I had to sell my personal collection. Many times over, I've actually sold my entire collection. The biggest collection I ever had was before 2010. It was primarily Omega and Zodiac watches, and I had to sell just about everything in 2010 due to some personal issues and stuff like that. Here we have another vintage watch. It's a beautiful Movado triple date. This is a watch that I've had now maybe for 3 months. I've put this watch up on eBay. I think now I have it up for like $1,000. And the thing is, this watch is the large size. It's a 36 millimeter size, which is considered a large size because most of these Movado triple date wristwatches from the 1940s that you will see out there, they're in a 33 millimeter case. So this is what we call the jumbo size for its time. And I've had it for like 3 months on eBay and it still hasn't sold. In the past, something like this, let's say 10 years ago, if I found this watch, I put it up on eBay, it'd be gone in 7 days or less. So that just goes to show that, the vintage market has been slow. I don't want to say that's been oversaturated, but there's not as much interest as was before. Here we have a hand heart. This is a vintage military chronograph, and this is a single pusher, mono pusher chronograph made by Hanhart. So a piece like this, I think we haven't even put it up for sale. I just bought it maybe a month ago. We did the service on it. This watch is probably from the 1940s, World War II time period. It runs within about 10 seconds a day after service. Really cool watch. In the past, there used to be so much interest for stuff like this. People would look for it, they would ask for it. Now it's like interest has kind of died down a little bit on these vintage timepieces. But anyways, that's it for now. Talk to you next time.